Welcome to today's IEC People, and I'm very happy to be joined by two good friends of mine, Fiona McLennan and Dr. Howard Pearce. And Fiona, I think, has been part of this church almost from the very start of her life. Howard for many years now as well. And so it's great to have you both here today. I should declare that Howard is my regular snooker partner, and we do battle most weeks, and we'll be doing a bit later today. And Fiona is almost my twin, I think born about 5 days before me. So great to have you both here. So let's go back to the start and get a bit of history from both of you. So start with you, Fiona. Tell us where it all began.
Well, I was born in Nelspruit, which is now Mbombela, and my parents were farming, but we came down to Cape Town just before I turned 2, and eventually my parents, after a while, I don't know how long, they bought the house in Rondebosch that I then grew up in, and this became their church, and my mother was confirmed here as an adult by Noel Tarrant, and I remember Noel Tarrant, who had for the children's talk, he had a big black doctor's bag, and then you'd wait to see what he brought out of his doctor's bag. And in those days, my mother wore white gloves to church, and I refused to go to Sunday school, so I used to sit and play with the gloves during the service.
So you were a rebel even back then?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Howard, where were you born?
I was born in Port Elizabeth, now America.
Yes.
And I stayed there until I was 10, and then my father was transferred, and so we moved out of Port Elizabeth at that stage. I was born on, if people know Port Elizabeth, I was born on the hill, lived on the hill near Ring Street, and went to St. John's Methodist Church, Methodist by origins. And then I decided when I was about 8, I think, or maybe just a year before, we had moved to Humewood near the beach, and I decided that I wanted to go to a different Sunday school. So I took myself off to a Sunday school in a train carriage near in the railway line, which was near the beach, a Baptist Sunday school. So I
became a Baptist at a bit
He was being a rebel.
Indeed. So Fiona, growing up in Rondebosch, tell us a bit more about your family, your parents, and your brother.
Yes.
And other siblings.
Just one brother.
Yes.
I also have a bit of a Methodist connection because actually my great-grandfather was a Methodist missionary who came out to South Africa and used to preach in Welsh. So in fact, the order of service for his funeral, the eulogy is in Welsh, so we can't read it. So we started, we were not a very good church-going family. I think my mother battled in vain to get most of us to come here. But we had a deal, and this was our church at least for Sunday, for Christmas and Easter, and a few services in between. And then when I was 18, I decided I wanted to be confirmed. Doug Bax had taken over by then, and I remember there was some distress because he wanted to be called Douglas, not Reverend Bax. So there were some murmurs about that, I think, at the time, and I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool, and that actually was, and Doug was so generous about it. They started a youth group called Charisma, and lots of people, Steve DeGruchy, and Anton and a whole lot of other people, Janelle, all the DeGrushis and various other people were part of that. Yes. And Douglas gave us quite a sort of free hand with some of the things we did, and that appealed to me. So that was my sort of real church journey with Rondebosch started when I was 18.
And so your parents, what did they do, and where did you go to school?
I went to school at Herschel, which is... It can have positive or negative connotations now, but I was pretty happy there, and I'm grateful I had a very good education there. My mum had also gone to Herschel for a time, and Mom was she was a stay-at-home mother, but she was also, my grandparents were still farming, and she became very involved with the farm, and especially after her father died. So really, my mother was a farmer masquerading as a housewife in Rondebosch. That was her heart was that of a farmer. And my father had also farmed, but when he came down here, he did various jobs, and then he started building houses. He build and sell. He'd been in the Second World War, and he came back and went to university and just kind of couldn't see the point of it. I think the war was, sort of affected the way he saw life, and he couldn't really see the point of studying, so he dropped out.
And were you a good student at school? Did you enjoy school?
I was a goody. I was very obedient. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed athletics in junior school. I enjoyed sport, not all of it. I did a lot of swimming and hockey in high school. I think I enjoyed high school more than junior school.
Okay.
Being older helped.
And did you take your studies seriously in high school?
No, I did. I worked hard. And I've got an older brother, David, who also comes to Rondebosch. And he lives down the road from me, which is great. So I'm very close to him and his family, and I like having him round the corner from me.
Great. So Hal, let's hear a bit more about your early years growing up in PE as it was then. Tell us a bit more about your parents and your school years.
My mom was Scottish. My father met her during the war period through some family connection, and I can't recollect exactly how that connection goes. And actually, so met her in Scotland because he was in the Navy, so he had been traveling. He ended up leaving the Navy because of health conditions, but eventually they got married just after the end of the war in Scotland, in Edinburgh. So they then came out straight away, and my mom stayed at home pretty much most of the time, and my dad was a sort of bottom-end white-collar worker on the South African Railways, a clerk. He then became an assistant administrator or representative, an assistant representative of the South African Railways in Bulawayo. So that's why the move, we moved from Port Elizabeth when I was 10, and we moved to Bulawayo for his job, but he still stayed with the South African Railways. And so I had my teen years in Bulawayo. Skipped a year at school because they thought I was too big or something. I can't remember the details. So
weren't you supposed to? It was because you were smart.
So I did what would be grade 4 and grade 5 in the same year. Half of it here and half of it in Port Elizabeth, half in Bulawayo. And then finished my schooling in Bulawayo before coming down to Cape Town to university.
I mean, obviously, Zimbabwe has a very good reputation for quality of education, and you would argue is better than here in South Africa. And was that a plus for you? I mean, going to school in Zim?
I was very lucky. I think I went to a good school in Port Elizabeth as well. It was Grey School, so I would have had a good education there as well. But I was very lucky with my schooling and with life in general. Growing up in those days in Bulawayo. I was free to ride around on my bicycle wherever I wanted to go. I had a very good schooling. I enjoyed school. I played every sport pretty much. We were encouraged to do so. I enjoyed it. And so that's true.
And so, Fiona, you went through school. Did you have a sense of what you wanted to do after school?
No, not a clue. So I did a BA. I'm not at all good with numbers. So I always say I married Howard to improve the gene pool. So I did a BA with languages, English and French, and of course religious studies, because if you come to Rondebosch United, half the congregation was teaching in the religious studies department. So it sort of was something that we did. And then I got a job it was working for South African Outlook magazine, which was quite fun. With Francis, I've forgotten what is his name. Francis Wilson, yes, and that I really enjoyed. But it was kind of a temporary thing while I thought about what to do, and then I felt very strongly, and I suppose coming from RUC as well, very strongly about justice and fairness, and so I decided to do a law degree. So I went back to UCT and did a law degree, which I'm sort of ambivalent about. I'm not sorry I did it, and I think I learned a lot of valuable skills, but I found it very stressful. I didn't enjoy the confrontational and the sort of combative nature of law. So I felt the fairness aspect and the justice was interesting to me, but I'm not the kind of person I don't want to go and fight with people in court. It's the absolute opposite of who I am as a person. So that was kind of a mistake, but you learn so much even from those mistakes.
You talk about, I just went back and did a law degree. It's not everyone who qualifies to do that. So, I was
very fortunate.
Must have been quite an achievement.
Well, it was hard work, and Howard and I got married when I was in 4th year. And
we'll get to that.
Yes,
how that came.
We got married here at RUC. So. And then I did my articles. I did a year at the Legal Resources Centre doing labour law, and then I did articles. But as I say, we got married, and time was marching on, and so I thought, well, if we're going to have kids, we need to have these kids. And I got a job. I started off volunteering, and then got a job in the Centre for Socio-Legal Research at UCT. So I worked there for, I think it was 3 years all told, and then our daughter Caitlin was born at the end of the 1st year that I was there, and I worked part-time while she was cared for at the Shay's house with Danielle Shay and Donna and Sue Ellen's middle daughter. So, but yeah, I can go on, because eventually I decided, it was a whole lot of things happened, and I just decided, no, this legal career is not for me. And that was when I went off and studied aromatherapy and reflexology. And I've always had an interest in medical things, but being hopeless at maths and science. So
it's a bit of a problem.
It is a bit of a problem. And so I've kind of managed to get into a medical situation through the back door, so to speak, which has actually been fantastic. So I'm very lucky.
It's quite a change of direction from the law, and you said, one of the catalysts for studying law was this desire for justice, etc. And then, to go into something that's much more, I guess, passive in the sense of, helping people calm and relax.
Yes, and very hands-on, not intellectual so much as physical.
Yeah.
Although obviously there is a large intellectual component to it. But I remember when my mum was in hospital, when she was very ill, and there was I think a nun visited her. She was at Vincent Pallotti, and she also asked me if I would come and massage her. And I remember that she said to the nun, this is my daughter. She has a law degree, and I said, Mum, if I was a lawyer, all I have to do is sort of sue the hospital. But here I'm giving you a massage. You must give credit to the other side, to the other side of me that. Does this. I'm very happy in the work that I'm doing now.
But it was the healing part of it, not just the calming part. The healing part.
And the
dream to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll come back to that. Howard, just tell us a little bit, about when you finished your schooling in Bulawayo. Did the family move back to South Africa, or did you? And what did you decide to do? And through school, did you have a sense of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was good at maths and science, and so I pretty much knew that I wanted to go somewhere in that direction. And I guess information in those days was a lot less accessible than it is today, and so you were kind of limited. Although other people managed to get into other spheres of work and influence, but I was sort of limited. So my first thought was about accounting, because of the mathematics, and people talked about it. That's what they knew, so they began to say it. But then through school, in my last year, there were people who came to the school to talk about careers. Oh, and even before that, I had got interested in architecture. So I worked for architects in Bulawayo during my summer holidays. So my first pay, I've got to tell you this, the first pay was for a month of work every day, drawing plans, because I was good at that kind of stuff as well, in an architect's office, and I got paid $1 Zimbabwean per day, which at the end allowed me to buy, I think, a pair of trousers and a shirt. So after 4 weeks' work. And then that kind of switched from accounting and architecture to engineering in the last sort of 6 months of my schooling. And I started to apply to universities to study engineering, civil engineering at that stage.
Okay.
And my dad died in the last year of my schooling up in Bulawayo. He had cancer and he died then. So my mom did, at that stage, decide to move back, and she moved back to Port Elizabeth. At the end of that year, I stayed on a bit to get my results. We did A-levels in those days, through the Cambridge-Oxford system, and therefore we had to wait quite some time before they were released via England, I think. And then I came down to UCT. I'd been accepted at UCT and had got a scholarship to come here as well. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I forgot to ask siblings. I mean, how many of you in the family?
Just the two. I have got an older brother. He's also 5 years older than me, as Fee's brother is of her. And he also had gone into engineering, but through what was then the Polytechnic in then Salisbury, now Harare. And so he had studied and gone on to work in the roads, on roads in Zimbabwe, and then down in Botswana, and then in the Northern Cape. So he was very much outdoors on roads everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you got into civil engineering at UCT.
Yeah.
And why civil? Was it just what you were interested in, or?
Yeah, I think things go in trends. So it was trending. It was the biggest department in engineering at that stage. Not that I really knew that, but I certainly had become interested in structures. And I don't know really where, I can't remember where I saw them, but large buildings, bridges, skyscrapers. And so all of that interested me. And it is a challenging area of knowledge. And yeah, so that was the real reason. And I stayed with the structural theme through my degree as well. I did better in structures than in some of the other courses that were more sort of what we would term civil. So they sometimes divide the civil from the structural.
Okay.
And that's how I started. Not that I continued all the way like that, but that's how I started.
Okay. And how did you meet Fiona?
I think Fiona has to start that story because she has a better memory than I do.
Not always. We met here. First. I remember that at one point we decided to take photos of the congregation, and I was going around with not digital camera, obviously, with just an autofocus, simple thing, and Margaret Reed has still got those photos for the church archives. And so I took a photo of this chap, just one of the many photos I took. But so I knew him through church, and then we had a mutual friend, and so I sort of got to know him more through the mutual friend, and I thought he had a very nice smile. And later on I noticed how he looked very good in an apron, and made very good food for this friend, and I thought these are all sort of good pluses, And yeah, so that was how we met at RUC.
What's your side of the story, Helen?
Yeah, so when I came back, so I haven't told you in between that I then studied in America.
Yes.
So I went to America after finishing here and did a degree in America and came back here.
Well, tell us a bit more about that. So where in America?
Okay, so I was accepted at the University of Illinois which is south. There are a couple of them, but this one was the one in Urbana-Champaign, south of Chicago, about 100 miles south of Chicago. And in fact, later on we found out that both Sue Ellen and Don had been at the University of Illinois as well, and Chuck Wanamaker as well. So we have a little alumni here. And so I did a degree there. Also, I had been appointed to 2 departments there, both civil engineering and theoretical and applied mechanics. I didn't know I could sort of make a decision late. So I had heard from civil engineering first, and I had accepted their offer, and so that's where I went.
Just to do a master's?
This was starting off with a master's. In fact, I didn't get my master's degree for one reason or another. I changed it into a PhD, so that was when I completed my PhD there. So I lived in Urbana-Champaign for over 4 years, nearly 4.5 years. Yeah. How
was that? Your American experience?
It's difficult to summarize it, but I was lucky. I was very fortunate to have that sort of opportunity to go and study in one of the best, probably in the top, usually in the top 5 engineering universities in the country. So I was incredibly fortunate. I experienced the humidity at about 40 degrees and 90% humidity in the summer, and up to minus 25 degrees, and humidity as well, but it doesn't really count in the winter. So that was one aspect of it. I managed a bit of travel. I met lots of people.
Played lots of squash.
I played a lot of squash. I even managed to win a tournament in Chicago.
Wow.
And don't forget that when you were in the first week or something, you became superintendent of the Sunday school of the church you walked into.
So I looked around for churches. I was living in Champaign. Champaign and Urbana are 2 kind of twin cities right next to each other, so they divide the university as well, and they divided down one street. I was living in Champaign, and I found another Baptist church. I went to an American Baptist church, which is not the conservative Baptist church in America. It was right opposite my residence, so it was very easy, and kind of, I don't know if it was a week or a month, but they appointed me as Sunday school superintendent.
Rocketing to start on me. I mean, Howard, was it a big deal? The kid from South Africa moving to Illinois. Did you know anyone? Was it quite daunting?
Yeah, I didn't find it daunting. I was enjoying the adventure to some extent, but I was again very fortunate because there was a small South African contingent already there. One of whom was a visiting professor, an assistant professor, I think he was at the time. And, I became friends with him, played a lot of squash with him. He's now an author of novels, in fact. And there was another group of students, at least 4 of whom were in engineering. And so I had a network. And then I eventually contributed to a book written by my professor. And in the book, he mentions the help of 7 people, 7 of his students, and each one of us came from a different country. So, one met people from all over the world just through this experience. I haven't kept up with them all, but most of them. But it was great at the time,
Wow.
Yeah.
So, back from the USA to Cape Town, and you connected with RUC somehow, and then you found it.
So first of all, I went back to my church that I had attended while at university here, which was Rosebank Methodist Church, and became very involved there and tried to do a lot of work because it was that transition time of state of emergency, first of all, and then 5 years later, Mandela being released, etc. But during the state of emergency, trying to, I suppose, make people more aware, because the church in general was quite conservative, very conservative, some churches, and others less so, but I I tried to get involved in that. It was tough going, but somebody had said, Doug Bax is at Rondebosch Congregational Church at the time, and so I used to spend the morning here and the evening there, or the vice versa. I can't remember. We used to, the evening here. That's right, because I was still involved a bit in the Sunday school there as well, and so it was the morning there and the evening here. We used to have evening services here. And so that's how I made the connection with the church here, and then eventually, left the Methodist Church and stayed here fully. And I remember Fiona, not so much from the church initially. I remember meeting her, through the end conscription campaign. So we were both sort of, I was peripheral to these campaigns, but we were politically aware, let's say, not great activists, but politically aware. And so met her through that, and then through our friend John.
And the end conscription campaign, you were quite involved with that, Fiona. I seem to recall you managed to get yourself arrested at some stage.
I think that wasn't for conscription. There was a protest against the Khayelitsha was being built, and a lot of people there were a whole lot of issues surrounding that. And a whole group of us from the church went to protest, and we were all arrested, and it was horrible. And obviously distressing for our parents, and Doug had to bail us out. And I remember his middle name is Stephen, and I remember they came and said, the Reverend Stephen Bax has bailed you out, and we were like, we don't know who that is, but so that was again, it's an important experience in your life. So it changes a lot about how you think and feel.
And was that one of the catalysts for making you study law, that you've been involved with these protests and some of the injustice and wanted to try and...
But the law, it's not always easy in the law. So much of what happens seems to rely on people having sufficient money to get a lawyer in the first place. So that is disillusioning. But I haven't lost the commitment to the justice.
Just worked out in a different way. Sure.
But one of Fiona's immense strengths, one of many, is her willingness to fight for other people's rights when things are wrong, and especially come to the help of people. And I say this because of Peter Kluneman. So tell the story of Peter Kluneman, who was a conscientious objector.
Yeah, there were a lot. You will have known there were a lot of conscientious objectors who came from Rondebosch, with Peter Mole and others. And Peter was the first, I think. And I can't remember how it all happened, but Peter was arrested. Well, he was in
the army, wasn't he?
And something happened, and
he tried to get information out.
Something, I can't remember the whole story, to be honest. You'd have to get Peter in and ask him. But through somebody I knew an advocate called John van der Berg, and I asked John if he would represent Peter. So all I had to do put them together. John did it pro bono, and he was very good at what he did. So
it was quick acting, It was immediately. I know how to respond to this situation. I know something you can help out. I just remember going down to the castle where Peter had been held.
That's true. Yes, I'd forgotten that.
So you've met each other at RUC, and presumably some sparks were flying, and you decided to get married. So tell us a little bit more about that, and then beginning a family together.
So we got
It was the cat that brought us together.
Well, it was, you tell that part. I had all these kind of unspoken criteria, and I had a lovely tabby cat who had never sat on my lap, and Howard came to visit me, and the cat sat on his lap. And I thought, well, this was a good sign. There were other good signs. Well, cooking was a very good sign. And anyway, we decided to get married, and Howard felt very strongly about us getting married on a Sunday, which I think is the idea being that perhaps in the ancient traditional way, not ancient, but you would get married in your congregation rather than in a separate thing attended by friends who might never set foot in the church.
It's almost like a sacrament.
I kind of saw it as a sacrament at the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just on a Sunday, it was in the service, in the regular service on a Sunday morning.
So Douglas had to get permission from the diaconate, as it was then. And so if you...
And Fiona's mother had to be very surprised.
Fiona's mother had to be pacified because she was worried we wouldn't... Shame on me, I feel like I'm being rude about home. She was worried that we wouldn't find a good caterer, but we found a very good caterer. She was worried people didn't work on a Sunday in those days. It gives away our age. And so they got permission, and so, obviously we had invited members of the congregation to our wedding, but anybody who just arrived at church that day could attend our wedding. So I have to say our wedding video is not very good, but you can see people, and our photographer wasn't very good, I don't think either. There's some lovely photos, but we wanted to actually show some photos of some of the congregation who are still like Sue and Reg and Doreen Scott and the Cooks and Steve and Deborah, Don and Sue Ellen, and others who've...
the decorations, John.
Yeah, John and Isabel, Betty Bax, of course, and others like John and Janet Tuck Kelly who went back to America.
I mean, these were people not only in the service but also at the reception.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we got married on a Sunday in the congregation, which there was, I think some of our non-church going friends, or I was thinking of some of my parents' friends who were a bit horrified they had to get up on a Sunday morning for a 9:30 church service. But yes, and then we had the reception at my aunt's house in Rondebosch. She had a lovely big garden, and so it was all right, very local, very nice.
And you said, Fiona, you were still studying at that stage. You were in fourth year. Howard, you were already working. Were you still studying? I mean, was there any money in the marriage here, or was it?
He was working.
Yeah, I had come back from the States to a job at UCT. So I remember my supervisor here when I did my undergraduate degree was a very well-known academic engineer, John Martin, who became dean of the faculty. But at the time I spoke to him, I think he was still head of civil engineering department. And because of the time difference, I had to sit outside in the snow while talking on the phone to him one day to make arrangements. But he had offered me a post in a research unit here. So I, first of all, for the first 3.5 years after I returned, I was in a research unit, and that would have taken us to about 1987, and then I moved into mechanical engineering, actually. I got a teaching post in mechanical engineering. So I was in mechanical engineering at the time we got married. And
I mean, you studied engineering, for those years. Was teaching at a university the direction you had in mind, or did you want to work as an engineer?
When I started, I wanted to work as an engineer. And slowly, and I can't recall all the different influences, but slowly I came around to seeing that I enjoyed both the teaching aspect and aspects of the research, and just kind of furthering understanding and knowledge. And when I again, as I say, I can't recall in detail, but while I was still in America, thinking of coming back to work at UCT was a very attractive proposition. Yeah. And I got the opportunity. Again, very fortunate. Yeah.
And stayed at UCT for
37 years.
Just 37 years. And Howard's just retired, I know, and we'll talk about life in retirement a little bit later. But I mean, you want maybe to stick with the UCT journey. I mean, 37 years. I mean, when you started, did you think, this is a job for life, or did it just kind of turn out that way?
No, again, I think a job in those days, with being politicized more and more, was very different for me. So I was always in some way involved in the political situation, not on the front lines of activism, but in some manner. And so a post became available. A unit had started, which was an academic support program in engineering. It had started in the late 80s, and I had expressed interest at the time, but I hadn't joined straight away. And when the first person to begin that unit, with the help of John Martin at the time, because he had the influence throughout the country, so he got the money from the big corporate people like Anglo American and Sasol. When the first person left that job, I was asked to take on that job and considered it, and at first for a limited period of time, but then I just loved the job. So I moved away from core engineering, although I still taught in mechanical engineering. I still taught all my fourth year courses for about, I don't know how long afterwards, 5, 8, 10 years, as I was moving into the academic support program and teaching courses in the support program as well as that developed. And I ended up loving it. The students seemed to like me, and I taught mathematics and physics throughout that period. But I still kept one course in my mechanical engineering offering, and that was an industrial ecology course, which I just loved. So it was very different from core engineering by that stage, because this was about sustainability, climate change. And it took me places that I hadn't planned on, but that I think were for me in the end. Yeah.
And I guess perpetuating this sort of passion for justice, the sort of environmental, climate justice. Yeah. Okay. And just to stay with the UCT years as well, I mean, obviously UCT, the demographic of the institution changed dramatically over those 36 years, and I imagine the whole culture of the place. I mean, how was that journey for you?
Yeah, because I moved, you can see the demographic changes in the photographs. It's quite interesting to go and look at the photographs of a class, a final year class along the corridor. Because I decided and moved into the academic support program, I was working primarily with Black students throughout for the last 27 years. I only pretty much taught Black students in those courses, but then I had a completely mixed class. And it added richness to the teaching experience completely. It was different, but it added amazing stuff. So I thoroughly enjoyed those changes.
Thank you. And then Fiona, you've talked a little bit about your sort of, foray into the law. It wasn't really for you, and then, sort of decided actually something more literally hands-on with the aromatherapy and massage. And how's that been for you? I mean, did you get a sense that, yes, this is home, this is me? And
pretty much, yes. I think a lot of people have found it strange. And then I say to them that I regard it as an upgrade. And it has led me to absolutely be able to do what is my passion. So I was lucky enough, when we were training as aromatherapists and reflexologists, we had quite a lot of community service to do. So you had a certain amount of practical work you could do on your friends who would all line up for free treatments.
I can imagine.
But you also had to do a large chunk. I mean, I know in Reflex it was 100 hours of community service. So, for example, I worked at St. Luke's Hospice, and I worked in the Burns ward at Red Cross, and I worked at Avondrist Old Age Home and all sorts of places to get my community hours. And then I volunteered at Red Cross, where there was, and I hope will be again, a thriving aromatherapy program, because of COVID, it's had to stop. And then thanks to my colleague there, who was called in originally by the Burns ward to come and work on the patients and has been there ever since, she said to me, I know you're interested in palliative care, and there's an organisation that's opened a palliative care unit at Sarah Fox Hospital in Athlone. Would you like to go there? They're looking for an aromatherapist as a volunteer. And that was where I met the people that I now work with, and I just really liked all of them. I mean, there was just a few of us in those days, And I don't know why, but I'd always had an interest in palliative care, and I'd been reading Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's On Death and Dying, and I remember it's got a little 1985 written in there. So I'd always had that interest, and suddenly, everything came together that the aromatherapy could work in the context of a palliative care setting. And here I met all these nice people. And for various reasons, they moved away from Sarah Fox. And the lady who's now my boss, Dr. Michelle Mayering, she decided to start an NGO called Pearce, which is where I work now. And so the biggest part of my work is aromatherapy, largely, more than reflexology, although I do use both, on our patients who are children. It's a children's organisation, so we take children up to the age of 18. So I massage our patients, and some dads, but mostly moms, and occasionally grannies and aunties. Dads are a little bit less keen to be massaged, but also predominantly the children are brought by their mothers. So I massage children in Red Cross, our patients in Red Cross, and at our clinics as well. And then I do other things like coordinate volunteers, which again is also in abeyance at the moment, and the social media and things like that. So I have a nice varied job, which I really enjoy. So I'm extremely lucky as well. I work with a great team of people who I enjoy and do work that I find fascinating and fulfilling. So I'm very lucky.
So let's also parallel this professional journey you both had with being parents and raising children. So Caitlin was born a number of years ago, and then Angus. How have you managed to juggle those responsibilities with your respective professional lives and personal lives?
Well, I can repay Howard's compliment. I could not have done it if I had not got a supportive husband. I think parenting is wonderful, but it's also very hard work. And Howard was an incredibly hands-on dad. He did bath time. He would come home, he committed to coming home. Even if work was busy, he'd maybe work later on, but he would be home by 5 for what is called suicide hour, and now cooks dinner, and there's always, I think he pretty much cooked since we got married.
You said that was what attracted to you.
Yeah,
how we looked at
boy,
it.
has it paid off. So, just to have, we had a very equal partnership in terms of raising the children, and I prefer to stay up late at night, and Howard likes to get up early in the morning. So we divided up. I think for I don't know how many years you got up at 5 every morning, because we just had children that woke at 5.
Right.
But I dealt with everything up till 5 a.m. But those precious hours between like 5 and 7, nobody could disturb me, and Howard would do all of that. And he still did all the kids' lunch boxes and everything. He was amazing.
Fantastic.
So that really, really helped.
But you didn't work full-time all the time?
No, I didn't. So I was getting, that was a double bonus. I had you helping and I was better. I did a lot of part-time stuff. When I started my aromatherapy, before I was working in Pearce, I worked from home in a room at home. So I did that, and I also trained as a mediator, and I did some divorce mediation as well.
Bringing some of the legal skills to bear.
Yes.
People at Pete's Power, where she works now, still expect the legal skills to come out.
Yes, it is useful. To be able to, because sometimes our families, something, maybe the child, a lot of the palliative care, it's not, people perceive it as purely cancer, for example. But say, for example, we've just recently a child who was hit by a car. So she's actually got a traumatic brain injury, and her mom is visually impaired as a result of a health condition. And so, something as simple as just being able to help the mom understand the nature of the legal situation, to kind of translate the legalese in a letter from the attorney. All of those things are useful skills. So I'm still getting a little bit of a legal workout. Yeah.
And so tell us what fun looks like for both of you, outside of professional life and parenting. I know Howard, we share quite an interest in sports and snooker in particular, but, what do you like to do for fun?
I read a lot, and I find some of that fun.
What kind of things do you like to read?
Up till about 2-3 years ago, I was reading mainly non-fiction, so I read around the area of my interest in my fourth year course, so economics, thermodynamics, ecology, stuff like that. But recently I've been reading a lot of South African and African novels, I've always got a novel open nowadays. I used to have a beach book. So when I went to the beach, I would have a book with me and it lived in my... Yeah, we loved the beach, and it lived in the car, so I only read it at the beach, so it lasted a long time. Usually not a novel.
Covered in suntan lotion.
I now again enjoy my snooker after having not had a partner for some time, so that's really nice. I had to give up my squash. I played a lot of squash. I played a lot of squash with Don in the congregation, but gave that up about 15 years ago now. I cycled to work every day up until the pandemic, March last year, and thoroughly enjoyed that. That's kind of made my day, getting up early, getting on the bicycle, cycling up to work, a good workout, having a shower, and then cycling home later that same day. That was great. Okay, we don't get out to walk a lot, but I walk with friends occasionally, so I like being out in the forest. We've done a lot of walking in the past, and camping. We've camped a lot in the past, but not so much of late.
Yeah. And Fiona, you warned me not to mention animals. This could go on for a very long time.
Well, my exercise is not nearly as much as Howard's, and I certainly didn't want to cycle up the hill to UCT. But I've always enjoyed swimming, so beach and swimming is a big one for me. And before COVID, I would swim at the gym a lot. And swimming is great. Being in the sea, being in water is where I like to be. Yes, I've got a friend who's been kind of dragging me down. I've been swimming in St. James all the way through winter as well, so I can now tolerate any temperature. I love to swim, and I read to relax. I do some more serious reading, but I just read whatever, detective novels, that just like complete escapism. And I walk my dog. So yes, I love my animals very much, and my exercise was walking the dog every day. So I don't do as much of that now that Howard's retired. So I'm out working more, and he's at home more. So he walks the dog more than I do at the moment.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. I have a 4 or 5 kilometer walk every day with the dog, and I garden quite a lot, so I plant vegetables and try and keep the lawn trim and stuff. I haven't got around to all the repair tasks, maintenance tasks that I have lined up, but I try and do those as well occasionally.
And we both love going to Hermanus, so for example, I could combine everything because I walk the dog on the beach, so I could combine 2 of the things. We're very lucky to be able to do that, and Howard walked up the mountain at Hermanus with Don on Sunday, so it was good.
And how's retirement, Howard?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. So I do sort of regular things, cleaning up and keeping the house okay and the garden and stuff, but I find time, a bit of repair and painting, and but I find time to read a lot, and so I'm trying to read sufficient so that I can eventually put things into writing in some form. I haven't decided, but it's going to be based on the work that I did in my final year course, the industrial ecology, to try and make it available to the public and possibly to policymakers. Not to publish necessarily in paper form or something like that, but just to make it somehow available, because I think it brings a certain kind of thinking that other people don't often see. So,
Great.
so there's lots to keep me busy.
And Fiona, is retirement a word in your lexicon, or you have to keep your husband in the manner to which he's become accustomed?
No, yeah, I'm not going to retire yet. We're too young, Russell.
Indeed.
I really, really enjoy my work and the people I work with and our patients. It's just incredibly fulfilling, and there's always so much more to learn. Well, Howard's obviously, still doing all that too, but there just is so much out there, and so it. I don't regret, when you get up in the morning and you look forward to the day, then you're very lucky. You look forward to your work. But it's emotional. It can be difficult, and I think that's something that one tends to overlook, that you are very much, it's very practical massage, and I do a little bit of counselling as well, but that work is it's very practical and literally hands-on, but there's also quite a large emotive, component, and so that, I think, is why I read detective novels, just to kind of let my poor brain just spin free.
Yeah.
And then I also do see private clients. So last year, the clients, the patients we see at work, as I said, are children, but I also see adults privately at home, and I've got just a few people that I see who are, some of whom are, one of my patients is 95. I've had a 97-year-old as my record, and that wasn't Sean from our congregation. I used to see her too, but someone who's reaching the end of life for whatever reason, be it from an illness or from old age. I just think there's a very important role in accompanying somebody, and some people call it now a death doula, rather like you get a birth doula who's a kind of a midwife. There's now a death doula, or an end-of-life companion, or a soul carer, or whatever the term is, and that is something I'm very interested in. I'm sort of in the process of becoming that as well. So I see patients privately, sometimes just ordinary healthy people who want a massage, but people who have a particular need and need the physical touch, the relaxation, and someone who isn't afraid to discuss death and dying if that's what they want to talk about.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story with us today. It's been very interesting, and I'm sure the listeners have also appreciated. So thank you so much, Howard and Fiona.
Thank you for inviting
Thanks,
us.
Russell.
Thank you.